Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a little girl, maybe 7 years old, standing at the door of a stranger's bungalow in southern India, having just escaped a temple.
Hmm.
Her small body bears the faint marks of, well, hot iron brands. She's been through something terrible, something so deeply wrong it felt like it darkened the sunlight.
Wow.
But then the stranger picks her up, puts him on her lap, and simply kisses her. And in that instant, for that little girl, that stranger becomes mother, body, and soul.
It's a scene that just sears itself into your memory, isn't it?
Yeah.
That stranger was Amy Carmichael and the little girl was Preena.
Yeah.
And that moment is really the heart of the deep dive we're taking today.
Absolutely. We received a request to dive into the life and, well, the incredible impact of Amy Carmichael using a collection of excerpts from a book about her life and her own writings.
Right.
Think of this as getting a shortcut to understanding her, exploring who she was, what shaped her, what drove her to this extraordinary work, and, what insights her life holds for you, our listener, navigating your own path today.
And we want to specifically look at her journey of faith, right? How it led her to that pivotal moment with Preena.
Exactly. And ultimately, how her life made an impact for Jesus and glorified him.
Our mission is to unpack her story in a way that feels approachable and real, not like a history lesson, but a conversation about a life deeply lived for something bigger than herself.
So where did this life begin? Amy Carmichael was born way back in 1867 in Millall, Ireland. She was the eldest of 7 children born to Catherine and David Carmichael, who owned the local mills.
And her earliest memories were very much tied to the unpredictable beauty of the sea, the blueness that looked happy, grayness,
Yeah.
and the anxious greenness that looked angry. You get a real sense of her connection to nature early on.
Yeah, you do. And the source material highlights that her parents were significantly influenced by that great Christian revival that swept through Ireland in 1859. Their faith was genuine, and it deeply impacted their children.
Right. Amy's very first memory related to her spiritual life, the book tells us, was smoothing a spot on her sheet in the nursery and asking God to please come and sit with me.
That just gives you such a picture, doesn't it? That early, simple, almost childlike intimacy with God.
Yeah.
But that simplicity also came with a dose of childlike literalness. Her mother once told her, Jesus answers prayer. So when Amy was 3, she looked in the mirror, saw her brown eyes, and decided she'd pray for them to turn blue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
As you do when you're 3.
Exactly. The next morning, she eagerly checked the mirror, saw the same brown eyes, and ran to her mother, disappointed that God hadn't answered.
And the response that came to her mind, or maybe her mother gave it, was simply, isn't no an answer?
Mm-hmm.
It's a small moment, but it's packed with meaning, isn't it? About the nature of faith and how God responds to our request, even as a 3-year-old.
Yeah, it teaches you that God's answer isn't always yes, but it's still an answer.
Right. It sets the stage for understanding that walking with God isn't about getting everything you ask for exactly how you picture it.
And Amy had quite the personality as a child, too. The source mentions that the will of a child can be like steel.
Oh, yeah. There's this anecdote about her stubbornly refusing to deliver soup to some poor neighbors. Her mother started to go herself, and Amy happened to see her mother's reflection in a mirror.
And seeing her mother's face in that moment, something shifted inside Amy. That stubborn will just melted, and she ran into her mother's arms.
It shows a tough will, yes, but also a deep well of compassion underneath that could overcome her own internal resistance.
And speaking of compassion, she had a fierce hatred for cruelty. Her first memory of feeling genuine fury was seeing another child torment a frog. Her mother instilled in her a deep love and respect for nature and all living things.
She grew up with 4 brothers and 2 sisters, so naturally adventure was part of the package. Can you picture the scene, young Amy leading 2 of her brothers along the precarious edge of a roof?
Oh, wow.
Or even more daring, taking a rowboat out on Strangford Lough with those same 2 brothers. It's known for some of the strongest tides in the world.
Oh, my goodness.
They got caught in the seaward current. The boys, panicked, told her to sing, and her singing, incredibly, caught the attention of the Coast Guard who came and rescued them.
Singing literally saved their lives.
Yeah. These stories paint a picture of a child with remarkable spirit, courage, and maybe a touch of the dramatic.
Definitely. But a significant turning point came when she was 12 at boarding school in Yorkshire. She admits herself she was often in trouble.
Right. She wrote that she had always trusted Jesus' love, rested in it, but it was during a time of silence in the chapel that she realized that there was something more to do, something that may be called coming to him, or opening the door to him, or giving oneself to him.
So it was a conscious act of surrender.
Exactly. That's the moment the source describes as her conversion, feeling of the Good Shepherd drawing her into his fold, and she understood it as a direct answer to her parents' prayers for her. This wasn't just head knowledge. It was a real heartfelt turning point that would, redefine her life's direction.
Things changed again around age 17. The family Mills faced financial difficulty, forcing her return home. Then, tragically, her father died in 1885.
That must have been incredibly hard.
Yeah. She took on homeschooling her younger siblings and began to show a real passion for improving the lives of the poor and unhappy around her. The source even mentions, quite neutrally, an early interest in socialism as something she explored through reading.
Interesting. And then there was that seemingly small but really pivotal moment in Belfast. Walking home from church with her family, they saw a shabbily dressed woman on the street struggling with heavy bundles. Impulsively, Amy and her brothers turned back to help her.
Right. But as other well-dressed churchgoers walked by without stopping, Amy felt herself flush crimson with embarrassment. And right then, words from 1 Corinthians flashed into her mind. Gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, the fire shall try every man's work.
Oh.
She wrote that she knew in that instant that life's values had changed forever. Nothing could ever matter again but the things that were eternal.
Yeah, that really shifted things for her. That incident, coupled with her conversion and growing awareness of poverty, seems to have solidified her focus. It wasn't just about doing good works. It was about investing her life in what would last, what had eternal significance in God's eyes.
How many times do we feel that nudge to help, only to hesitate because of how it might look? Her wrestling with that embarrassment and the clarity that followed is a powerful lesson right there.
Absolutely. And that clarity led directly to action. She started gathering local children in her home on Sunday afternoons.
Gathering those kids, right, in her home.
Yeah. And by 1888, she was instrumental in building a metal hall, the Tin Tabernacle, for outreach to Belfast mill girls. And the source highlights a key pattern here. She had no money for it, but she prayed, and the funds came.
It established this foundational principle for her. Trusting God's provision explicitly for the work he called you to do.
And what an impact that hall, which seated 500 people, opened in 1889, and astonishingly, is still in use over 130 years later.
Wow, that's incredible. A testament to the enduring power of a work built on faith and prayer.
Definitely. While doing this, she also started attending the Keswick Conventions, known for focusing on deepening one's spiritual life. This was crucial for her development.
Right. She met influential figures like the evangelist Dwight L. Moody and Hudson Taylor, the founder of the China Inland Mission. And she also formed a close friendship with Robert Wilson, a Quaker and convention founder.
Yes. And at age 21, seeking to reach more people, she moved to England to work with factory workers in Manchester, even choosing to live in a slum area to be among them.
Yeah.
But her health suffered significantly. And Robert Wilson invited her to stay with his family in Keswick to recover. She thought she might stay there permanently, supporting his ministry.
But God had other plans. On January 13, 1892, she had a distinct spiritual experience where she heard the words, "Go ye," and understood it as an unmistakable call to overseas mission.
Wow. Not a vague idea, a directive.
Exactly. Redirected her entire future.
And Wilson, recognizing her call, gave her some profound wisdom about ministry and winning souls. He used the analogy of a stonebreaker at a slate quarry being asked, "Friend, which blow broke the stone?"
Okay.
And the answer was, the first one, and the last one, and everyone between.
What was the point of that?
The point, Wilson told her, was, "Thee must never say, thee must never even let thyself think, I have won that soul for Christ." Amy reflected on this years later, saying, "The joy of the winner and helper of souls is something apart from every other joy, but it is tarnished the moment the eye comes in."
So it's about humility. It's about recognizing that the true work of transforming a soul is God's work, not ours.
Precisely.
Our efforts, whether they seem like the first blow or the last, are just part of the process he orchestrates. It keeps the focus squarely on his power and glory, not our perceived success. That's a crucial lesson for anyone trying to make an impact for Jesus.
Exactly. After some initial mission work elsewhere, Amy arrived in southern India in 1895. For 4 years, she traveled by bullock cart with a British missionary couple and 4 young Indian women, living simply, camping out, visiting villages, and sharing the gospel message.
And it was during one of these trips, in March 1901, in a village called Penivali, that she met Preena.
This was the defining moment we opened with. A tense woman arrived at their bungalow with 7-year-old Preena, who had just escaped a nearby Hindu shrine. The woman was fearful and on the verge of returning Preena if Amy hadn't been there. And when Preena ran to Amy and was scooped up, put on her lap, and kissed, she felt that instant connection, later saying, "The first thing she did was to put me on her lap and kiss me. From that day, she became my mother, body, and soul."
Wow.
The source notes that Amy herself didn't immediately grasp the full significance. She didn't realize this wasn't just one child rescue, but the start of her life's true calling.
Right. Preena's story revealed something horrific. She had run away before, sensing something ugly and wrong about the temple dances she was being prepared for.
Yeah.
She made it home, but her mother, fearing divine vengeance from the temple gods, had returned her. This time, she was punished with hot iron brands.
Just awful.
Preena's accounts of things that darkened the sunlight, the reality of her life inside the temple, spurred Amy and her colleagues to investigate what appeared to be a great secret traffic in the souls and bodies of young children.
They took extraordinary steps.
Yeah.
Amy and one of her Indian colleagues, Bonamon, camped near a temple village. Amy, with her dark hair and eyes, even darkened her skin with coffee to pass as Indian so they could mingle discreetly.
Really? That's incredible dedication.
Yeah. Their method was quietly sharing as much as we could in the life of the people by listening, not by questioning. They found asking direct questions often closed doors.
And what they uncovered was devastating. They discovered that due to poverty, shame, or a desire for spiritual merit, some parents were selling or dedicating young girls to temples.
These children became wedded to the gods, trained in dancing and rituals, but were effectively used as sexual slaves for temple priests and devotees. The source reports this impartially, explaining it was a form of systemic abuse rooted in complex social and religious practices.
Right, and the force includes a quote from Sir Monier Williams that touches on the complexity of Hinduism, acknowledging its philosophical depth, but also noting its grotesque forms of idolatry and the most degrading varieties of superstition.
Amy's perspective, as presented, was that this secret traffic wasn't inherent to the true spirit of India, but rather something alien, like a parasite which has settled upon the bough of some noble forest tree on it, but not of it. She saw it as an evil that needed to be confronted.
When Amy wrote back to England, hinting at the sexual abuse and the scale of the problem, her reports were largely dismissed as exaggeration. She felt desperate, writing, "The thing that we wanted to do appeared to be impossible, never a little one saved." The burden felt crushing, almost unbearable.
And here is a powerful moment of faith from the source. Amy describes a day when the burden felt too heavy to carry. She looked at the tamarind trees outside and felt as though they were olive trees. And under one, our Lord Jesus knelt, and he knelt alone. Wow. In that moment, she knew it was his burden, not solely hers, and he was asking her to share it with him.
That completely shifts the perspective, doesn't it? It wasn't just her trying to fix an impossible situation, but joining Christ in carrying the weight of that suffering and evil.
Exactly. This realization seems to have given her the strength to face the immense opposition that followed. They were accused of kidnapping and faced significant local animosity.
Yeah, the source notes that while today some might view this work through the lens of cultural imperialism, the documented fate of the children adds a new dimension, even referencing a medical missionary who heard frightened cries, indignant cries, sometimes sharp cries as of pain emanating from a nearby temple.
Yes, the source captures the complexity. It includes the perspective of a mother who defended the temple practices as ancient custom, contrasting the glory of her daughter dancing before high-caste Hindus with the groveling life of your Christians, seeing Amy's attempt to change things as arrogant.
So contrasting worldviews right there.
Definitely. But Amy's focus remained on the suffering and abuse she saw as the parasite, not the true heart of the culture or people she came to love.
This all led to the establishment of Dohnavur. It grew into a sanctuary, but the early days were marked by hardship. They rescued 13-day-old Amethyst, but she died soon after. Then 2 more infants died.
Oh, heartbreaking.
Yeah. This profound sorrow led them to set apart the 6th of each month as a dedicated day of prayer specifically for temple children and for the community to be filled with Christ's love to care for them.
And the sources say they saw God often work powerfully on that specific day for deliverances.
It's remarkable how sorrow wasn't just something to endure, but something that galvanized them into focused, faithful prayer.
Right. And gradually the empty nursery was indeed filled. Amy became known as Amma, or Mother, to the children, embracing the joys and anxieties of motherhood.
She connected it to a Tamil proverb about children tying a mother's feet, adding that, "We let our feet be tied for love of him whose feet were pierced." What a beautiful way to frame sacrificial love.
It really is. The Donner family grew rapidly to 70 children by 1906 and 140 by 1913. With each child rescued, they learned more about the dreadful underworld.
Amy wrote that sometimes the things seen and heard felt like they had killed forever the laughter in us, but they understood that the children desperately needed laughter and joy.
The practical needs were immense, housing, for instance. The source mentions they prayed for funds to make bricks for a new nursery, and the exact amount needed arrived on the very day Amy suggested they needed it.
Wow, again with the specific provision.
Yeah, it reinforced that pattern of prayer and provision. They also needed consecrated women workers, which was challenging because childcare wasn't considered honorable work by society. Amy realized they needed women with a deep, clear commitment.
This led to the formalization of the Sisterhood of the Common Life in 1916. It included both Indian and British women, notably Preena and Panamal, modeled after a 14th century group dedicated to living and serving together, bound by love born of their dedication to God.
So it was a diverse community united by a shared purpose rooted in faith.
Exactly. So, moving beyond the narrative of her life, what key insights and lessons did Amy Carmichael share, particularly through her extensive writings? The sources are just full of wisdom drawn from her experiences.
Yeah, they really are. She often described life as a journey. It is a climb. It is also always a war, emphasizing the call to be always a soldier for Christ and not get entangled in the affairs of this life. Things like idle chatter or ways of thinking that distract from God's call.
That phrase, always a soldier, really underscores the intensity of her faith. And she followed it up with a challenging question. What do we know of travail?
Mm-hmm. This wasn't just a rhetorical question. It was a direct challenge against the love of ease, urging people not to shrink back from a life that involves hardship or sacrifice, mirroring Christ's own suffering.
She wrote extensively on spiritual warfare, too. She believed you needed to be continually on the alert to detect the approach of the enemy of souls.
Yeah, and she had this fascinating observation that peace is often the first thing the enemy attacks. She called it our sentinel, because if your inner peace is disrupted, you're less effective. She believed peace must be guarded.
That makes sense. If you can maintain peace in your heart, external circumstances lose their power over you. She quoted Job. When he giveth quietness, what then can make trouble?
Right. And she observed that often it's the little things that shatter our peace, precisely because we try to handle them in our own strength instead of immediately turning to God with them.
Yes, that turning point to God is key. And she taught that if you set out to truly exalt the Lord in your life and work, you will become a target for attack on your work, on yourself, even on your innermost nature.
It's not strange, she said, because the work depends utterly on Him, requiring a close walk, and the enemy will oppose that dependence and closeness. Don't be surprised by it.
How did she recommend fighting back, especially when it came to temptation, those great staining temptations like selfishness, ambition, or other sins that arise in the mind?
She had practical, faith-filled advice. We have the power, she taught, to close the door of the mind to these thoughts. But it's not just self-discipline. It relies on God, who worketh in you both to will and to do.
Okay.
Her simple method was, don't fight the temptation in detail, analyzing it or wrestling with the thought itself. Instead, turn from it.
Turn from it. So not stare at it and try to demolish it with arguments.
Exactly. Don't look at the temptation, don't look at yourself and your weakness, but only at your Lord. She suggested specific actions. Sing hymns, read scripture to drive your thoughts into a new channel, or go and do something for someone else. The key was redirection rooted in looking to Christ and relying on His power.
And when you do this, the unwelcome visitor will vanish.
Right. And she had this intriguing thought. The attempt to resist temptation in this way can actually work against the enemy and potentially give you the key to the confidence of one who needs your help, perhaps someone else struggling.
That's profound. Your own struggle overcome by God's power can equip you to help others. Prayer, of course, was absolutely foundational. She wrote, "If prayer matters," acknowledging how the devil constantly fights against our time in prayer.
Yeah, she differentiated between types of prayer.
Yeah.
The restful prayer of committal that brings peace, and the intense wrestle, conflict, agony often needed for deliverance, particularly for the children they were trying to rescue.
She increasingly realized her own inability and God's mighty power, stressing the importance of knowing how to pray effectively.
And she recommended a swift and simple way. When overwhelmed, short, direct prayers like, "Thy courage, Lord," "Thy patience, Lord," and so on, spoken with confidence in His presence.
Her life also taught her about delayed answers to prayer, which can be one of the most difficult things in faith.
Definitely. She described waiting 3.5 months in intense tension and prayer for the deliverance of a young girl shut up with a demon-possessed woman. This sort of prayer costs, she wrote.
Hmm.
It was a mystery to her. The gospel showed instant salvation, but here was delay. She had to learn to accept the silence of our God. But when God's intervention came, it was so clear that everyone saw it was his hand, giving him the glory.
Accepting God's will was another major theme, which she called a word of liberty and victory and peace.
Yeah, but she clarified this wasn't passive resignation, especially regarding illness, which she didn't see as coming from God. Instead, it meant contentment with the unexplained.
Contentment with the unexplained. I like that.
She used the analogy of the refiner's fire and the goldsmith who knows the gold is purified when he can see his face reflected in it. This illustrated God's work of purification in trials, connecting it to the faith journeys of Job and Peter.
But despite this understanding, she could still voice the raw, honest question, "O Lord, why? Why didst thou make flesh like a field, threaded all over with roads and lanes where burning feet continually do pass?" Acknowledging the deep mystery of suffering.
It shows faith isn't about having all the answers, right? It's about trusting even in the unexplained.
Amidst all the difficulty and suffering, she found profound joy in serving others. "Forget yourself in serving others," she wrote. "That is the way of joy."
She firmly asserted, despite the pain, there is no life in all the world so joyful, experiencing far more joy than pain. She encouraged giving oneself wholly to the Lord as the path to this joy.
And the sources illustrate this joy. Making a home for the children transformed Donover from just camping. They cultivated beauty, planting trees and flowers, decorating with shells and wood because, as she put it, beautiful things are dear to God.
This attention to beauty and joy in the midst of hardship is such a powerful aspect of her life.
Love and community were the absolute bedrock of the sisterhood. Amy taught that the ability to truly love one another comes from God. It's not something we naturally possess in the necessary depth.
And she was starkly honest about the opposite, unlove, calling it deadly. It is a cancer. Deadlier than any cobra. Strong words.
Very strong. She emphasized practical steps to cultivate love, like thinking the best of each other. She shared anecdotes of how easily trifles a poorly cooked curry, a simple misunderstanding, could cause great harm if not handled with loving frankness.
The law of the family, she taught, was to go directly to the person with whom you have an issue. Love will find a way to resolve it honestly and kindly.
And crucially, she urged them to go on loving, go on praying for them that despitefully use you, and avoid feeding after thinking or after talking about hurts or disagreements.
That's incredibly challenging, isn't it? To actively choose love and forgiveness, especially after being hurt. It really gets to the heart of what it means to follow Jesus, who prayed for his enemies.
Yeah. And Amy consistently battled the I, the self. She saw the passionate longing to be the one to rise and serve as a subtle selfishness, a kind of covetousness, which is idolatry of self, in the perpetual cry, "Use me."
Wow, that's convicting. She used simple analogies to illustrate this fight against self-centeredness. The pen and pencil. If the work gets done, does it matter which one is used?
Right.
She shared her own struggles with feeling unfit or unsuccessful, and how the Father's responses would confront her self-focus. Quotes like, "Did I ever tell thee that thou wert something? Canst thou not trust me to make thee fit? Did thy Savior care for Calvary?" were used by God, she felt, to shame and humble her.
Redirecting her focus from her own ability or importance to simply being faithful, even if it cost everything. It's about God's glory, not ours.
Exactly. That concept of giving up the need to be the star or the used one is a powerful countercultural idea even today.
So true. What about fear? She worked in incredibly dangerous circumstances.
She taught that fear is infectious, but so is courage. She strongly encouraged refusing the spirit of fear and opening hearts to power and love and discipline.
And the greater reason to refuse fear, she argued, was that yielding to it suggests to others in unseen spirits that our Lord is not to be absolutely trusted, which profoundly dishonors him. Instead, she prayed for valor.
And for feeling downhearted, her practical advice was simple. Go and do something for others. This, she found, leads to the place of Habakkuk's truth. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord.
That's a powerful action step. When you're feeling down, serve someone else. It shifts your focus and opens the door for God's joy. She also framed welcoming little difficult things as opportunities.
Yes, chances to say no to self and grow strong, to do but also to endure. She cautioned against feeling sorry for oneself, asking, what is anything we have to bear in comparison with what our Lord bore for us? This is a stark reminder of perspective.
And she spoke of a secret discipline for those living entirely for others, a discipline that cannot be escaped or sheltered from, which the soul chosen to serve folds around and holds fast, like a flower bud protecting its treasure.
It's the quiet, often unseen cost of a life surrendered. She illustrated this with the story of Kohila, who renounced marriage and children not because it was wrong, but because the other way was appointed for her in service at Dohnavur, and she found her heart satisfied by him alone.
It's about finding deep fulfillment not in societal norms, but in God's specific call for you.
Despite the weight of the work and suffering, the sources keep returning to the themes of beauty, joy, and simple intimacy at Dohnavur. Sick or strayed birds became pets. Children's imaginative play with dolls and mud houses brought delight.
They found beauty everywhere in nature, from beetles to flowers, and in the sky, even seeing green clouds at sunset.
She saw the spirit of happiness in difficult circumstances as a sheer miracle, enduring like the rotifer, a tiny creature that can dry up and be blown away by the wind, but revives completely when put back in water.
What a great analogy for resilience rooted in God.
Yeah, and she firmly believed that nothing is too small for him to help. This trust in God's care extended to every detail. She noted that earnestness does not necessarily mean heaviness. It is the joy of the Lord that is strength.
Simple, effortless intimacy with God and with the community was essential for their shared service, fostering an affinity, the knitting no hand can ever afterward unravel.
Amy suffered a severe fall in 1931 that crippled her for the last 20 years of her life. She was largely confined to her room, but remarkably, she continued to guide the community through letters and wrote 15 more books during this period.
Incredible. The sources emphasize that this time of intense physical suffering bore rich fruit in her writings and influence.
Yeah. When we look at her legacy today, the source presents an interesting discussion about how her life is interpreted. Some, like Elizabeth Elliot, have held her up as an icon of submissive femininity, pointing to her total surrender to God.
Right. But the source also argues that her life was a powerful expression of sheer determination, grit, and leadership. She didn't just follow. She initiated the campaign to rescue children. She established and led the Dohnavur community for decades.
This perspective suggests her surrender wasn't primarily about being submissive as a woman, but about radical Christian submission, mirroring Christ's surrender to the Father's will. The call to surrender all to God is universal, not gendered, as presented in the source.
That's an important nuance to grasp. It highlights that her life wasn't defined by societal expectations, but by her obedience to God's specific calling, which required immense leadership and courage.
Absolutely. Regardless of interpretation, the source makes a clear point. Amy Carmichael's life, alongside others like Priscilla and Betsy Stockton mentioned, testifies that God raises up women in all times and places to take the gospel to the ends of the earth, bringing good news for the poor and freedom for captives.
For you, our listener, her story isn't just a historical account of a missionary in a faraway land rescuing victims of trafficking. It's presented in the sources as illustrating a struggle common to every person who sets out to follow Jesus, the greatest adventure of all.
Her insights, forged and refined not only through active ministry, but also through years of quiet suffering, aren't just for those called to overseas missions. They are a guiding light through the times of storm and drought that we will surely face, whatever way you are called to serve or live out your faith today.
We've seen those lessons woven through her journey. The supreme importance of obedience over perceived success or reputation. The radical trust in God's provision.
The reality of spiritual warfare fought primarily in the mind. The absolute necessity of guarding your peace, understanding that prayer is powerful and often costly.
And accepting the unexplained and God's silence. Finding profound joy in self-forgetful service. The vital role of love and community built on truth and grace.
The constant battle against self-centeredness. The I. Choosing courage over fear, even when you're trembling inside. Finding surprising strength in welcoming difficulties. The quiet, essential, secret discipline of a surrendered life.
And ultimately, finding complete satisfaction in his call and his presence alone. Her entire life, as captured in these sources, was aimed at glorifying Jesus in her surrender, her tenacious obedience, her fight for his vulnerable ones.
Her utter dependence on him in prayer and provision. The deep love and unity she cultivated as a reflection of him, seeing suffering as a path to purification so his face could be seen, and ultimately seeking only to be found a good and faithful servant by him.
We've journeyed from a little girl praying for blue eyes on the rocky Irish coast, navigating life's literal and figurative storms, through a powerful conversion and distinct call, to establishing a vast work in India built entirely on prayer, love, and unwavering faith, facing unimaginable opposition and suffering.
This deep dive reveals a profound challenge to surrender everything. The ever-present reality of spiritual warfare, the transformative power and cost of prayer, the essential nature of community built on God's love.
The counterintuitive freedom found in forgetting yourself, and the deep, enduring peace that comes from embracing God's will, even when it's unexplained and painful. These aren't dusty lessons from history, they speak directly to the complexities we navigate today. The information overload, the pressure to achieve, the search for purpose, the reality of conflict and disappointment, and the call to live a life of faith that truly matters, a life that glorifies God.
So here's a thought to ponder as you reflect on Amy Carmichael's story. She learned that her work depended utterly on God and couldn't be done for a moment without Him. What would it look like to approach the challenges you face today, whether big or small, with that level of absolute moment-by-moment dependence on God?
Or thinking about her willingness to welcome the little difficult things as a chance to say no to self and build strength where in your own life could welcoming the small irritations, the minor disappointments, the hidden acts of service actually build surprising spiritual strength and resilience in you.